It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and action.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Marc Williams, and welcome to another episode of It's About to Go Down.
I'm Cathey Armillas, and we have Sam Diaz with us today. Oh my God, Sam has become a fast friend of me and Marc, and Sam just gave a TEDx Portland talk, y'all. And do you want to hear what it was about? It was about land use. So before I knew Sam, I didn't even know what the term really meant. And he rocked this talk. It was so good. So Sam Diaz, he's the executive director of an organization in Oregon called 1,000 Friends of Oregon, 1,000 Friends of Oregon. And that is what they do all day long, is they deal with communities and they talk land use. And I'll let Sam get into that. But we're going to kind of talk today about how do we make land use sound cool and sexy, right? So welcome, Sam, to our show.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you. Yeah, and I think what I picked up right away from the TEDx structure is how do you talk about something in a provocative way and a little bit of like a secretive way so that you wrap it in a story, you wrap it in easy takeaways for the audience who are so excited to learn. Like the amount of love that was in that auditorium back in May was just amazing energy, especially for a city that is still very much like coming out of the COVID pandemic, still coming out of, amazing, what I think are amazing protests for racial justice. But I think like finding its new identity, finding its evolution. And so to have that kind of program that TEDx offered was just an incredible opportunity.
So Marc, it's funny, you and I have so many connections on the coaching, but you never really get to see the behind the scenes of what I do with TEDx Portland and when I'm coaching somebody. So I'm excited, Sam, for you to like even tell Marc and to tell the whole audience, like tell us a little bit about that process,
yeah.
what it took from day one that you were like, oh, I'm giving a TED talk to like actually standing on the stage.
Okay, so Portland, this is my first experience, my foray with the TEDx crew. I had watched some before, but I think this was like a whole new level that I was really encountered. And so TEDx Portland has a nominations committee. Cathey, you can probably explain this better because I still don't understand like the wizard behind the curtains on how they choose. But what I was told was that there's a group of people who have done previous TED Talks, who understand, like have a strong pulse on what is really important to Portlanders and Oregonians at the time, what's been covered in years past and what should be highlighted. And one of the things that Oregon is known for and Portland is known for is its land use planning. So how our city feels and looks. And then, just an hour away are these beautiful, iconic farms, forests, and watersheds that offer us farm to table experiences, that offer us, amazing local produce at the farmers market, that offer us, thousands of miles of backpacking and hiking adventures. And so it's that delicate balance that Oregon has really done well. And so this was something that the nominations committee was like, we need to talk about this. This is a big anniversary for the landmark land use legislation. And, so I got a call in December, random call, picked up a number I did not know. And it was someone on the committee that said, hey, we would like you to speak on this topic. So it wasn't like, okay, Sam, we want you as TED. It was like, no, Sam, we want you to talk about land use planning, and ultimately like had some, like this was how it was going to fit in the overall program for it. So I think from there, it was kind of like a surreal experience, like what was going to happen. And then thank God they linked me with an amazing speaker coach, Cathey. And I did you even get a say? Did you even get to choose?
Mm-mm.
Like you just like, well, okay.
Yeah, I get the same randomness you do. It's like, here, you're gonna coach these two people, and here you go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But you had background in working with executives like at the business, in the business community on land use, transportation, housing. So like what are the critical investments to really make sure communities are healthy and vibrant and the economy is successful? And so I just lucked out with Cathey as a pairing. And I think from there, like it was really trying to figure out from our community, making sure that I was elevating the stories and the accomplishments, and also being really honest about some of the, I think, gaps that we still need to address, and packing it all in to 14 minutes of a talk.
Wow.
All of that, Mark.
Land use. I'm first of all, there's two things. I feel like I always say that. There's probably a multitude of things in my brain. I want to just give credit for a moment to something you said earlier, Sam, that it came down to being provocative, being secretive, storytelling, and a takeaway. Like that right there is already such a sweet formula for giving a great talk. So thank you for opening up with that. The second thing that's on my mind is land. Like land. Like we're going to talk about land and make that interesting. Sam, I got to tell you, many years ago.
He's like LAND?
Yeah, really? So many years ago, when I was teaching advanced placement English, one of the books that was recommended for me to teach was a book called Return of the Native. Now, Return of the Native, for probably about the first 40 pages, that's an exaggeration. But for like the first 50 pages, all it talks about is the land and the scenery. And my students are like, oh my goodness, when are we going to stop talking about land? And here you are, this is your bread and butter. You talk land use. Cathey just said you went up on stage and for 14 minutes made land use sound like such a cool topic. I'm curious because I think in order to do that, there had to be something about land use that you found cool way before you were ever invited to speak on stage. So when did you discover that talking about land and land use was cool? Like, did it happen on the playground? Where did this happen?
Sam's like, damn, I don't know. That's a
Yeah. Well, I come into this, from a farm worker family in Northern California. And the reason why we were up in the Sacramento Valley is my grandparents immigrated from Mexico through the Bracero program, which was a farm worker program. And they worked on Oroville Dam and Shasta Dam. And then once the dams were built, they then worked in the orchards and the fields. And my dad and his siblings also did. And so I think in my family, there's always been a connection to how we steward the land, how we manage our resources. And then in the Sacramento Valley, you're surrounded by three sides of it are mountains. And the pollution from the Bay Area and Sacramento comes up and then it sits there. And then when we have forest fires, and now they're becoming wildfires, but the smoke from those fires also sits there. So I'm an inhaler kid. A lot of my friends, a lot of my family are inhaler kids. That means like we have asthma. That's how I talk about it. But
okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
He's like, what are you inhaling? What are you talking about?
Yeah. That's so I think like when you grow up in there and then when you leave, you realize, oh, not every place is like this. And not every place, I went to school in New York at Colgate, and students would say, why, like, what is this inhaler? Like, what are you, or why are you buying so much bottled water? And I'm like, well, I don't really trust the tap water. And I also, you know, I need this in order for me to breathe. So I think that when I left, there was this realization of, oh, there were a lot of decisions being made about where I live and the people who I care about. And I want to understand that better, and I want it to work better because I don't think it really is. So that's what really motivated me to learn more about the decisions about how communities are built and who gets the resources and who gets to live where. And that's why I love, that's why what I do does not feel like a job.
I love that. When we first started talking, Sam was telling me, Mark, about things that I was like, I had known there's a thing, the 50-year landmark decision that Sam's referring to was instituting, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying it the wrong way, that we created these boundaries around our land called the urban growth boundary. And we have I learned this in working with Sam. I had always known the one that had kind of went around the Portland metro area because everybody kind of talks about it. And it's a little bit of a point of contention. Sometimes people like complain because they think that the housing prices are high because this boundary creates a space where people cannot build, or the land changes, right? Like if the line's here and you can build, single family homes, right outside of it you cannot. It's designated for farm or for forest or for something else. And so it's just being very very particular about where things can be built. And then some of the cool things that Sam probably is just kind of like things he knows about, but things that we ended up talking about and ended up in his TED talk were like, well, there's like 16 million homes in the West Coast that are put in wildfire zones. 16 million, and Oregon only has 100,000. So Oregon's done a really good job of protecting those spaces and making sure that we're not putting people there. But some of the things that Sam does is like things that people that come to Oregon that love are like, Columbia River Gorge, love our Willamette Valley, where all of our great wine comes from, love our coast areas. They're not understanding that it's because of a very intentional land use program. We're not just letting people go, hey, let's make this into a New York City. Let's turn this into Manhattan. And but so, yeah, I don't know, Sam, tell me and Mark and everybody, when we started working together, remember all the first sessions that we had, and we were having session after session after session before we could even really get to the idea. Because there's so much that we were talking about. Kind of, if you want to talk about that process a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think this was like such a gift to the cause, to 1,000 Friends of Oregon, because we're very much used to inviting people into our work in like a government style setting. So people get land use trainings, or they're already somehow knowledgeable about a land use decision and they want to influence it, so they come to us, and so this was like a whole new way, I think, of going about it, because this was like people who love Oregon and who are obviously engaged in some way that they're coming to TEDx, but they're not gonna wake up thinking about land use planning. Some are, because it is Portland, but they cheered, and they cheered when I like called that out in the TED talk. But that was just more of like, okay, how do we really get the feelings, not so much the policy, but like the feelings of being proud and being protective of the place you call home. And whatever that looks like for you, wherever you are, you want better for your family, you want better for your community, you want better for you. And that is the feeling that motivates someone to really make the best land use decision possible. So that to me was just the goal was getting people to have that feeling, and then figuring out with Cathey how exactly were we going to do that.
Well, I'm already curious now, because I think that's a fabulous question for everybody to really think about. That's a powerful statement. How do you evoke feeling of being proud of what you call home? So what was some of that process that you and Cathey went through to then evoke that kind of feeling in the crowd?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it started, I to be honest, I got a little caught up like interviewing some of our board members, some of our like previous staff, some of our executive directors, and there were so many amazing things that came out of it, but it wasn't me. It didn't feel like me. And like, to be honest, I put that in the draft, and like Cathey and I will talk about this, but like it did, I would say I stuck to the company script when I first put it together. And I was like, I think this is what I'm used to. This is what will be good for the organization. And, you know, this is a 49-year-old organization I work for. Obviously, something's going right here. People, you know, continue to donate to it. We have plenty of funders and business partners. Like, it's an amazing organization and cause. And so that ended up being the first draft. Was like, you know, 50 years ago, Oregonians came together to push for this legislation that called for a statewide land use system. And it ended up, I'm not going to do it all because that's not what we ended up with, but it felt academic and like informative and nice, but it didn't feel like me. So I think part of this journey was like, how do I get comfortable putting my personal story into this, adding it as part of an option for the company script? Because this isn't the company script. This is someone before me's script for the company. But I think I need to be confident to say my story and my script can also be another option for people to come into this conversation and for people to care about good land use decisions. So, but it took support to and a little bit of like a shaking of, you know, Sam, what are you doing moment for me to like realize and like be like, no, this isn't gonna work. This is gonna be a missed opportunity if I go with the regular company script that we've had. So
Cathey, you're like one of my favorite teachers or favorite types of teachers, right? You're upfront, and you're very like this. You don't just let things slide, right? Like, you know, you don't sweet talk it or anything like that, right? If there's something that you'll shake them up, right? But you do it with so much love. You do it with so much love and guidance, you know? Yeah. Cathey, I'm curious from you, because Sam just said, I had to get comfortable sharing my story. How do you get, or what do you think is the secret sauce to having people get comfortable telling their story? Because that is, when we think about speaking in front of people and worrying about being judged and oversharing, that can be a really tough thing. So what's the secret sauce for you, Cathey?
Well, you asked it with the right person, because with Sam, because I think with some other people, there might be like, oh, I have this story, and that might have been their portal through. But Sam kind of came to it of like, I'm the executive director of this thing. I really care about this thing, but there's like this thing, and then there's like me. And I just kept at him. I was like, tell me about your family. Tell me about this. Tell me about where you grew up. Tell me about like, why did you get into this? I asked him some of the same questions. And then he finally hit a story, which ended up, I'll never forget the day you told me this, Sam, but I had probably asked him 100 other questions before it. I felt like I was like interviewing him, like, what about this, Sam? What about that? And then he ended up saying this one line, and I'll never forget it because we were just sitting in a room together. And he goes, well, my mom kind of always told me and kind of taught me that in order for me to kind of like, you know, make it in the community and to like, to be connected with people is I have to find common ground and like find it fast. Like he didn't say it exactly like the line, like, and then I was like, what did you just say? that what? Like, that's a great story of how, like, because that's what he does in his job. And so then we saw the parallel and I was like, oh my gosh, such a good parallel, because you're having to go out to these farming communities that sometimes don't have the same ideals that people in, you know, the urbanists and people in the city, and they have different agendas. I mean, many times it's all the same bigger goal, but there's many times people in the room that are coming together that all have different ideas and ideals. And so for Sam's story and to bring his mom into it, like, what? It was so good. So that's how we ended up opening and closing the talk, was like, and we even did it, and we were very intentional, like even on the slide, like I remember telling, you know, when we were going to build the slide, like we don't want to put Sam's mom's name, put the quote and put Sam's mom, like, because it really hits home that it's his mom. And like, you're talking about home and places that you call home and places that you love and people that you love. And so I wanted that connection to the heart of like, it's Sam's mom. Right. And so anyway, that's, but here's the funny part. Am I okay to share, Sam? Can I share my reaction?
Yeah, Cathey,
okay.
You can share whatever.
Okay. So we're in the TEDx Portland office and he's going through like his first kind of like major run through, like, oh, here's a draft. And we're going to show it to some other people on the team just so we can get some like outside, some input and feedback. And we do this with every speaker. And so I was like, oh, I'm so excited because we had just come up with this great story and everything. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for them to hear Sam's, talk. And I think I had seen you the day before. If not, it was the day before that. So it was like very soon. And so I'm sitting there. I'm all like proud speaker coach mom, right? I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, this is going to be so great. And Sam starts talking and I'm like, what happened to whoa, where did the story go? What is all this stuff? I never even heard this before. Whoa, all this. So then he starts saying all this stuff and I'm looking around the room like I'm scared because I'm like, are they thinking I'm pitching this up as like, this is his talk? And I know that and I see them sitting there being polite and I see them going, oh my God, this is like way too much information about land use. This is not going to work as a TED Talk. And then when he was done, they were so polite and they were like, if somebody was really trying to get a PhD in land use, you gave a good Cliff Note version of it. That was really good. But we're missing, I think somebody even told you, Sam, like they're missing the emotional connection and why it's important to you. And we got to frame this a little bit better. And then I took Sam around the corner and I was like, oh, I think I'm going to choke you. What happened? and Sam, but I like what you're saying, Sam, too, because now I can understand more of what actually happened, right? It's like, this is the stuff that he works with every day and he has to have the conversations. And so everything he was saying was really good. I agree with him. What he was saying, I was like, oh, academically, that stuff was amazing. But I thought that to get somebody to bring their own story into it and to make the idea palatable and accessible to as many people as possible was going to be the best way. And if you go watch his talk, I mean, Sam crushed it. Like, so good. Like, you watch it and you go, and we had talked about this, right, Sam? We wanted other people in other cities to watch it and go, wow, Portland's really doing it right. Oregon's really doing it right. We should, and there are other states and cities that are actually doing that anyway, but we really wanted to multiply that. And so, Sam, I just want to tell you, I feel very proud about where it ended up, and you made it accessible to everybody, to the people that do land use. They know that's just baby step one. They know that, like, you don't have to give them the PhD version. So anyway, that's how it kind of went down, Mark. But we had that moment in TEDx Portland where I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Sam,
I'm glad
curious.
you said it and I did not have to like hash it out. Oh, yeah.
Sam, I'm curious, that moment when Cathey's asking you 101 questions and this quote comes from your mom and she's like, that's it, drop everything, go for it, right?
That's the one.
What was going on in your head, in your body at that moment when she's now pushing you to tell that emotional side when you are most comfortable with that information side? Like, what was going on in your head, your body in that moment, if you remember?
Yeah. Well, I think Cathey just, I mean, has a gift of like showing that she is there for you and for really important causes that are going to shift culture for the better. And so it allowed me, I think, to like be vulnerable and like share things that I don't typically share with my coworkers or with my board members or like with, you know, and so yeah, I mean, I think that those sorts of memories out because I was able to be vulnerable in the brainstorming part and then ultimately like being like, okay, I kind of now understand how this story can cut through and really like reach people and resonate with people and like for them to start owning their story too. And so yeah, I think because when I first got nominated, I did say, I was like, I want this to be about the cause. I want this to be about land use. I want this to be about, you know, all of the people who have made this possible. And I don't want it to come across like as about me. And so I was like like I was very just a little paranoid, I guess, around that coming across or like that going in. But I think because we started with land use, the substance, the movement, like all of the people, and then this came later after as part of the brainstorming. I think that's when Cathey was really able to say, oh, we're getting more pieces to this puzzle and now I'm going to help you reorder them. And I don't know if you remember this, Cathey, but like, because at first I was like, oh, I think we should start with the line like, what I've learned in this work is every place someone calls home.
Yep.
Every place is important to someone. And Cathey was like, no, you're not going to start with that. You're going to start with like, that's not going to make sense. It's like a good line, but it's not going to have a punch as if it went after your personal story, because that's how you connect your story and invite others to have that feeling that we want to create. But you need to, by you being vulnerable, others are going to be vulnerable too. So, and that's where you start getting the, you know, the feelings come out in this experience. So I think Cathey helped put just more pieces to this than I ever would have thought.
Marc, I know, because, you know, you do the same thing that I do. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Sam. And for anybody watching, that's the level of detail you get down to, especially with what I call this like a legacy type talk. To me, there's different types of talk. There's a keynote. Great. You can do a keynote, but I call it a legacy talk. And with a legacy talk, it's super critical, like the order. And so you could probably hear that, Marc, right? That was a great line. He ended up using that line. I just didn't think it right out of the gate it was going to like punch people with no context. And so that's why when I was asking him some of the questions, I was like, well, let me find out more about your own home. If everybody has a place that they call home, let's find out more about your home. And then I was asking him questions. And then when we got to the mom thing, I was really excited. And I was like, oh, people love that. People love when we learn lessons from other people, because nobody really likes that you stand on a stage and you're like, I have something really awesome to tell you because I'm so awesome and I'm just great. I can't wait to tell you the things that I know, And so we love when we find lessons from other people. And so just to put that in there and then to have him segue to that. And then all the land use stuff was in the middle. And even then we made sure that we never let him go too far on getting deep into the weeds without putting in a little micro story or without putting in a line. I mean, he delivered so many funny, great, if you watch the talk, this is so many moments that were intentional, that we're like, okay, we're going to break away from this for a second.
I'm glad that you just used that word at the end, Cathey, intentional, because you said earlier, and I so agree with you, people need to understand the level of detail that goes into a great message and a great talk. In addition to that, the level of intentionality. Like when you talk about the order of which thing, of where you want to put things. One of my favorite English grammar words is syntax, right? It's the arrangement of words and phrases. And people don't even understand, like, if you take this phrase and put it over here and that word and put it over there, it can have such an entirely different impact. So I think that's a really important thing to point out. It's the level of detail. It's the level of intentionality about arrangement. And even thinking about the emotional part versus the, shall we call it, the intellectual or informational part of it, right? The logical part of it. And where do you put everything? That's genius. I really hope anybody's listening is really picking up on that.
Well, and Sam, I want you to tell the story about how this happened because, Sam, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to steal your thunder. I want you to talk about it. But Sam told me that he used to go out and talk to kids about land use. And then when he told me what he said, I was like, we have to use that. Oh, that was another moment where I was like, this is so good. This is not just for kids. He explained land use in such a visceral way. And so, Sam, take it away. It's in the TED Talk. It's so good.
Yeah. I mean, I still use it, and now I use it for different audiences, but I think it's boiled down to two things. And the first is dirt, and really talking about Oregon has some of the best soils in the world, thanks in part to the Missoula floods, which is very interesting because a lot of people in Oregon do know about the Missoula floods. It was a glacier, went through the dam and then brought all of the nutrients from Idaho, Montana over to Oregon and deposited them there. So we have class 1 soils. I mean, they are some of the best in the world. And we also have, our farmers, our foresters, our ranchers, 97% of them are family farmers. They have local roots right in Oregon. So when we think about the types of decisions that are being made, who's lobbying those decisions, they are invested in long-term sustainable stewardship. They're not going to sell out and move somewhere else. They're not some corporate entity that has operations in all different parts of the world. This is their home. So I think we have amazing stewards here in our state, and we see that in the results of land use decisions for protecting farms and forests. And the second is the Mona Lisa, and this is really, I think I said 10 million people visit Paris, France each year, and they go and see the Mona Lisa, and I will bet you that they do not zoom in and only see the frame. And so I invited people to think of our urban growth boundaries, our frames around our cities and towns, like the frame of the Mona Lisa. And they're important, but if we only focus on the frame, then we miss out on what's inside and what's outside that frame. And so I do think, as Cathey mentioned earlier, there's a really big constant debate. It's been it's always some sort of issue around the urban growth boundary. And people want to get rid of it because the land inside is valued it goes for much more than land outside because we are able to keep that exclusive protection to say this land outside is only for farming, only for forestry. You can't build a strip mall on it. You can't build a subdivision on it. And it keeps the land prices for farm and ranch, it keeps it low. And so it's about $10,000 per acre. Inside, say that land gets brought in, same land, it goes now for about $700,000 per acre. So that means that the farmers aren't going to be able to buy it. And now you've just brought in that land that is going to only increase the price of whatever goes on it. So those were the two ways. I did it very short, very punchy. Cathey helped, but wanted to provide more context around why I felt like those were so important, and why I thought they also were evergreen. Like they're attributes of Oregon's land and land use planning program that they're not going to change. And so I just wanted to highlight those. And I got to give a shout out to my fiance, Ben, who made the deck.
The slide deck. Yes.
Had
Hell
really,
yes. Shout out to Ben.
Although I still need to practice. I still have the PowerPointer slide is a whole skill, which requires a whole training on, which I did not get an A+ on. But that, I think that was the dirt and the Mona Lisa was click, click. And it was the drop of the dirt, the drop of the Mona Lisa right on. I think it just made the audience laugh right away. So and they're
never going to forget that, because you explained it to Mark in a very long way, but when you did it on the TED Talk, you said two things: dirt and Mona Lisa. I just want to tell you two things about land use right now: dirt and Mona Lisa. A big pile of dirt comes flying down on the slide, and then the Mona Lisa comes and then lands and it's kind of swinging for a second. What he said and then what they visually saw in the room, there's that intentionality again, right? If you're there in that moment and you saw that, you're never going to forget that. And even if he doesn't have the, just as from a speaking standpoint, Mark, even if he was going into, let's say he was talking to a classroom somewhere and he's just going to say, dirt and the Mona Lisa, they're still going to really remember that, even without the visual. It's just really powerful.
I talk a lot about my background in education, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. And I got to tell you, Sam, this particular conversation makes me want to just encourage you to not only speak to the people in your circle of land per se, but there are so many other professions, and especially as education, right? We as educators have a really tough job of teaching young people who sometimes ask, why am I learning this? This is so boring, right? And as educators, we know it's really important, but it's sometimes really hard to make trigonometry or the parts of speech or chemistry interesting, right? And this whole idea of how do you make something cool to learn? I was just talking to a teacher earlier today who was struggling with the same thing. She works with second graders. And she was told by a supervisor, you've got to be able to make it engaging. And her thought was, yeah, I know that if they can find a connection, but there's no connection. But I wonder, everybody's got a dirt and a Mona Lisa somewhere in their topic. And the idea of getting people to think about what their dirt and what their Mona Lisa is, and whatever topic they're teaching, is genius.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And that's, I think, what was the pinnacle of what Sam was talking about. And sadly, people sometimes that are really close to what they talk about and what they teach, they sadly don't understand human psychology and how people connect to things. You make I'm in the midst of working with another organization in Oregon right now. I don't want to say who they are because Sam probably knows them actually. And they're actually asking me to work with them for the same reason. They're like, oh, we have all these engineers, we're working on this thing. And the CEO, like he already self-identified. He's like, I already know I'm overloading with too much information. And so sometimes we feel guilty. So if you're watching right now and you're like, yeah, I feel guilty, I feel like I'm dumbing it down. It's not dumbing it down. I mean, Mark, you and I keep saying it, but you're putting cognitive load on people's brains, and they can only handle so much. And so they need that emotional spark. Like I watched your talk the other day, Sam, and I was just like, it makes me so excited about Oregon again. And like it sparks the emotions in me. And so that it makes me intellectually care. And Mark, like you said, coming from, being an educator, still being an educator, like that's the hardest part of educating, is getting people connected to it,
Yeah.
And adults are the same.
Absolutely. And that's why I love the phrase or the term human psychology. And it's funny enough, the conversation I had earlier with the teacher, I used that phrase because I said,
is that why you were like,
yeah, because that's what we forget, that when educating, when sharing information, when communicating with others, we often forget that there's a psychology behind this, right? And it's funny, the metaphor that came to my mind right now is, I think about anytime somebody has soda, right? And you might be pouring the bottle of soda into the glass, but you take your time, because if you pour too fast, the foam and it spills over. So you got to understand, you got to take your time. And sometimes with communication, we're trying to pour the whole bottle into the glass. Like we're just trying to turn over the bottle and dump it in. And it just doesn't work. It's just messy.
And it loses its fizz super quick.
Yes.
It's another metaphor in there. Yeah.
So I love that. I love the human psychology.
Seems like, where is this conversation going?
I mean, no, I'm just like, I feel like there should be like a little bit of a prep before conferences. And like, I get there are going to be like certification programs and some conferences that have to, information overload. But I think I do think that at the end of the day, most people, if you give them the space to feel and to learn and to connect, you're going to end up in the same place. And people are going to be happier, probably happier and more energized to be there with you.
Well, I don't know if either of you can remember back to, like, maybe we could play a game. Maybe this could be our game, Mark. We always love to play a game on our show. Well, yeah, let's do it. I think it'd be great, because I personally believe now, because I've been doing this for so long, I can't think of a time where somebody has to just give information, because I think of the best professors, best teachers actually will, but it's easier. Sometimes it's just laziness. It's easier for me to write down a bunch of information and then just tell it to you. I think that's the lazy way of teaching is all. So if somebody is, giving you a lot of information and they have to give it to you, they can still give it to you in a way that will connect better, that will, they can still do it that way. So I would like to ask each one of you, and I'll say mine as well. What was like your favorite teacher or somebody that taught you something that could have been really, really hard to digest, and yet they did it in a really good way? Because we've all also had, like, I had a really bad science teacher that was very monotone when he talked, and it was really hard to understand anything he was saying. And then every once in a while he would laugh and we didn't even know he was like making a joke, because like everything was like so dry and stuff. But then, I had one of my teachers that was actually my psychology teacher. I ended up having to take an elective, and I had taken like everything else. Like, I'm not really good at drawing and didn't like it, but I took ceramics, I took yearbook, I took photography, I took all these things. And then I ended up taking Psych 101, and I'll never forget it. I had a teacher named Mr. Snyder, and then ended up getting Miss Webb. And I loved those. That was like my favorite class. And every day when I came in, I was super excited to learn whatever they were going to teach, because every time he would teach something, he would teach a story with it. He wouldn't just give me the like this is like cognitive dissonance, and cognitive dissonance is blah, 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 blah. He would give you a story, and then you're like, oh, wow, that's why people do that. And so that became my favorite class. And I still credit him and that class to this day for what I do, because I believe I use a ton of human psychology in teaching people to speak and marketing and everything I do, right? So that's mine. Mark or Sam?
For me, it was actually a teacher that I worked with, Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin was a fabulous teacher, and I remember going to him once and telling him, so I'm trying to teach my students about this literary element called allegory. And I remember in class as a teacher using that word, and kids were like, "What? I don't get it. I don't understand. Right? What are these terms you're throwing at? Nobody uses the word allegory. I don't get what that means, right?" And one of the things that he taught me that I still use to this day, as he says, and I love this, is about learning and feeling and connecting. Sam, I'm going to use those words. He says, here's what I do when I try to teach students about what an allegory is. I take a piece of paper and I write $20 on it. And I hold it up to the class and I say, this is a $20 bill. And then he rips it up. And the kids look at him like, all right, what the hell does that mean, right? And then he reaches into his wallet. And I don't have a $20 bill in my wallet right now. That tells you the state of the world.
And I hope you don't rip it up either.
No, but see, that's it. That's it. So, and I did this after he taught it to me. I then take out a $20 bill and I hold it up to the class. And all I had to do was a slight movement, and the whole class was like, no, give it to me, Mr. Williams, give it to me. And then we went on to explain, because, and this is how he said, he goes, an allegory is like a symbol, right? We've all heard of symbolism in literature, but an allegory is a type of symbolism that we use to discuss things that are too hard to talk about because we're too emotionally invested in it. So I can't talk about money. I can't talk about religion, right? I don't know if anybody's seen the Barbie movie, but I just watched the Barbie movie. The Barbie movie is an allegory.
Yeah.
Right? It's an allegory, but it's hard for us to talk about feminism and all kinds of issues dealing with gender and sex without getting too caught up. But if we talk about Barbie dolls, okay, right? So that was genius, just the creativity and the uniqueness. So that's the example that stands out to me.
Good job, Mr. Baldwin. Wow. So great. So great. Wow.
Sam, your turn.
My God. Yeah. I'll say someone that I saw present in California a lot when I worked there. And her name's Anant Shankar Osario. And she's a linguist by background, but she's turned that into basically providing assistance on campaigns for certain policies like paid family leave. And so she does trainings to say, listen, all you policy people want to information overload. You want to, it comes across as you want to be right. I don't think that's your intention. I think your intention is to bring more people into this cause that is going to benefit everyone. And so she has a really great way of, I think, breaking down what a policy person would say versus what is actually going to bring some of the public around. And so her example around paid family leave is, when you do your polling, or even as you do your script for your commercial, do you support paid family leave? Generally, the majority of Americans do. Should a parent be with their child the first time that the child smiles? that receives a much higher level of support.
Of course. Oh my
And then
God.
you go in, and then you also go and find the imagery and the footage, right, for that moment when the baby first smiles and the family's there, they're not stuck at work. And so it's like, to me, like I read her book, and watched a lot of her seminars, but I remembered her from my time in California because I was like, I think this is where we actually need to put a lot more oxygen in, if you're a policy advocate or if you're in politics or if you're putting a campaign together, because I think this is actually what's gonna help us be really connect with people in an authentic way, and is going to keep us accountable on, is this policy actually making good for, on people's lives. So I love Anant Shankar-Rosario, big fan, hope she watches this, but
I hope so too.
I just
Brilliant.
really resonated with me.
Brilliant.
Wow, that's
Brilliant.
cool. That's cool. I just wrote down in my notes, how do you put more oxygen into your message? How do you put more dirt into your message? How do you put more Mona Lisa into your message?
I love it.
Right? But ultimately, how do you give space to learn, to feel, and connect? I love that you said that, Sam. That was awesome. That was awesome. Cathey was joking a few minutes ago. She goes, Sam is probably thinking like, where is this conversation going, right? Because I think that this conversation was sparked by your interest in land use. The greater gift from this conversation is not only that you can get people to be a little bit more interested in land use, but well beyond that, you can get people excited about, how do I get other people excited about the things that I'm excited about, right? And just the psychology behind making an idea cool. And you can apply this lesson for so many things, right, Cathey?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I do love that where we ended up with was really saying, hey, there are two ways to do a message. And if you have a lot of information, you can absolutely do it that way. And that's the easy way, because most people who are speaking on things that they know, they could blurt out 100,000 facts that, most people wouldn't know. And so that's great. They have all the information, but then you can do it this other way. And all three of us have just given really good examples of, somebody that we've learned from that had done it in the way that I love, Mark, that you pulled that out, that said, like, adding more oxygen to your message. Like, what? I love that. I think I'm going to use it forever, because I feel like you smother people. It's like, what you're supposed to do on a fire to put it out? You're supposed to put a bunch of dirt on it. Why? Because it smothers it. Well, that's like all that dirt, no pun intended with your dirt, Sam, because it's like, this is not really good dirt that you're putting on. It's just okay dirt. No, but you're taking the dirt, and the dirt is kind of an analogy for all the information, and you're smothering the fire. You're not allowing that fire to be within other people. So if you want to add, fire does really well with oxygen. If you want to add more oxygen to your message, I like that. I love this. I love this show so much because, everybody who's watching right now, please go watch Sam's talk. You will see, it'll be really fun to hear. This is kind of the behind the scenes and all the work that it took and everything that he had to go through to, even the kind of things that you went through immediately. I never even knew, Sam. I'm hearing this for the first time, that you were like, absolutely not. I'm not going to talk about anything. I didn't even know you were adverse to it. Like, I didn't know that. I guess it just kind of naturally migrated the other direction, but I didn't know that you came into it with like an idea, and to see where it ended up, to show how much intentionality that we put behind the way that we communicate, especially in a legacy type talk.
Yeah. I think for me, it definitely got me comfortable with my personal story, adding some sense of humor to it, too. Just, I think you gotta make people laugh, and also you have to laugh yourself. But I think it just, I think the comments, the reflections back, I think it taught me that even though that you may be delivering the presentation or your speech or your keynote, the way you do it can actually invite others to tell your story. So a lot of times when people come up now, they're like, they start sharing their story. And they get really deep really quick sometimes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much for sharing. But I think I'm realizing that if you are able to like really be vulnerable, really be authentic, you're going to receive like that. It's not just a thing, it's not just a good job, it's a like you're actually going to really get to know others, because they're just going to say, oh, this I trust this person, and I can really now share. I understand where they're coming from, and I want to share with them where I'm coming from. And so I think that has been like just such an amazing like privilege and outcome of the way that we structured the talk. So, and I think there are some people that came away with like some of the information sound bites, like around the wildfire you pointed out, or just I think the phrase help our cities build up and in rather than out and down. And I think people really came away saying, like, it's so simple, but that is exactly what we need to be doing. So yeah, I think that was my takeaway is, oh, you still can have your personal story, and it actually allows more other stories.
Yes. Sam, that was a beautiful takeaway from your experience with the one and only, the phenomenal, the awesome Cathey Armillas. And we just had, and I'm so thankful to meet you today and to hear about that whole process. And as you summarize what others walked away from their experience of listening to you, I'm curious, over this last 45 to 60 minutes that we've been talking about land use and how to make ideas cool, what is something you're going to walk away with after this conversation?
Oh yeah. Well, I think from it, I think it just reinforced that there's a difference between telling someone something and really teaching someone something. And like what you were saying, Mark, about all of if you take the time and if you are creative, right? It's an opportunity to be creative and like pull from different points of reference that others are experiencing, that you're experiencing, and like really like put that kind of experience out there for others. I think you can make a topic, as boring as land use may be, but you can make a topic something that people look forward to, and at least have like a positive association with. Because that was the last thing, and I definitely have seen this, is like, oh God, like a land use talk. Oh God, like what is this going to be about? Which is nice when you have a low expectation like that. But I think it's, yeah. So I think that's my main takeaway, and I think is really paying more time and attention to that approach.
Nice. Well, I hope what everybody who's watching will take away is that they need to, as soon as this episode is over, go and watch your TED Talk. Definitely, definitely. Sam, for those who want to learn more about land use, about how to make ideas cool, and about anything else related and connected to Sam Diaz, how do they find out more about you and everything that you do?
Yeah, so I probably spend way too much time on LinkedIn. So I do get a lot of news. Love to connect with people. So please find me on LinkedIn, Samuel Diaz. And yeah, if you want to learn more about 1000 Friends, if you're in Oregon or if you're outside and you're really curious about some of the things that we're doing, and we also I would say we don't have it all figured out in Oregon. We have some amazing head starts here in our land use system. but they're really amazing things that we're able to learn from other places throughout the country. So, please reach out. Our website's www.friends.org and check us out.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. And remember to everybody, check out Sam's TED Talk and check out and remember this idea. Whatever idea you've got out there, put some oxygen on it. Put some good dirt on it. Put some Mona Lisa on it. It'll be totally awesome. And for anybody who's watching who wants to think about and wants to have a conversation about how you can make the idea that's in your head a cool idea that's just going to reach a wide range of people and have them telling you about their idea and even looking forward to the next topic on that particular idea, hit us up, Marc and Cathey. We absolutely love having these idea conversations. Our website is It's About to Go Down Show. And we love to have you, or we love to have anybody you know who has a great idea that they need to share. Sam, thank you. Cathey, thank you. To the world, thank you. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you join us again for another idea conversation on It's About to Go Down.